So why am I here? Well, indirectly, it's because in 2012 I decided I was getting a bit old and that I wanted to make sure that 2012 was different from 2011. So I committed to not saying no to anything this year. So when Marius phoned me up to ask me to come and speak, I think he knew I was a sucker right from the start because I was already committed to not saying no before he'd even opened his mouth. And more directly, he's asked me to come and speak about a youth leadership program that I've been involved with for a long time now. And actually I've spent 7 summers involved with it, first as a participator and then as a staff member. And what is this youth leadership program? Well, the Louis Augustinus Foundation, which runs it, says that what it is doing is creating a better world for tomorrow by inspiring young leaders today. Fine. What that is? Well, since I've been involved with it, there's a common theme when you ask people to describe what it is, which is that they really struggle to. So if you're completely confused at the end of this talk, there are actually 5 alumni, I think, in the audience today. So do feel free to go up and ask them what their interpretation of it is, because today is about my interpretation of it, what I think its successes are, perhaps how it gets there, and maybe some of the limitations. Rising Sun has had a massive impact on my life, and I would say possibly even I describe it as having ruined me, because before, when I was 15 and about to go on it for the first time, I had a really clear idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an astronaut. I really genuinely wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be rich, and I wanted to have a really big house. And now I work for an international medical relief charity. I am very rich in many ways in my life, but I don't think my bank account is ever going to sustain a very large house. Now, Rising Sun is an intentional community, so a bit like the co-housing we heard today, Layla and Vanya talking earlier, a group of people who have chosen to live together, sharing resources, responsibilities, and actively pursuing a common vision. Now, what does that translate to? Well, they pick bright, motivated young people aged between 14 and 16 from countries all around the world and different countries on rotation, and put them together in one space. They separate the girls and the boys because between 14 and 16 that could produce a whole nother dimension. And they stay in New York for 2 months over the summer and build a community and carry out a carefully designed program to test that community. There's a man named Tuckman who has a group development model that says that communities go through 4 stages. Forming, so that's the everybody's playing nicely and getting to know each other stage. Storming, which is the now we're actually getting to know each other and we don't yet have a way of dealing with that. Norming, now we're agreeing on some shared values and ways in which we're interacting. And then performing, now we are a highly functioning, hopefully, group of people. And I think it's that performing part that really excited me about Rising Sun. So if I can give you an example of something from one of these community summers of a group where I thought, wow, this group is really performing. I was sitting in as a staff member on what turned out to be a 4-hour conversation. And it really was a conversation, even though there were 50 girls there, teenagers, talking about something. And what it was they were talking about was that they thought that someone had stolen something from a suitcase. And so as the staff members sitting in and watching this conversation, we were fully expecting it to be, we must search the suitcases, we must find out who it is, we must determine a consequence, because we'd spent a lot of time in the summer talking about actions and consequences. But actually what they were talking about was not the person responsible or what a consequence might be. They were actually talking about their real concern that this incident might threaten their ability to trust each other. And they resolved instead in that 4-hour conversation to completely forgive whoever had carried out the incident itself, and for it not to be discussed again. And instead what they wanted to take away was to double trust each other, to consciously attempt to trust each other more. And that was not the outcome that I was expecting. I was incredibly humbled by such a mature and interesting response to that incident, and that what the staff were kind of doing the emergency planning for if the community kind of fell apart a bit. Instead of coming up against a hurdle, this community had a way of interacting in a framework for expressing themselves that allowed them to take the community further forward instead of coming up against some big hurdle. I was really impressed by that. And when the summer's finished and these young people go away, we've seen time and time again how Rising Sun alumni have managed to go and contribute to their local communities and the global community too. So some recent examples, a young person left and in the summer, so finishes in August, and by December has managed to motivate and fundraise to put solar panels on her school roof. Or just this month, one of our alumni has released a film worldwide called Chasing Ice, which is looking at our environment and how our glaciers are receding. Or Marius, who's helped organise a TED event, and I think that TEDx event. And I think that all of these come from their Rising Sun experiences. So now you must be thinking, I've told you a bit about some of the successes. What exactly are they doing for 2 months in the middle of the Hudson Valley in New York, in tents and with streams and rivers and things? Well, it's not the what, although the what is very similar to any other residential summer program in the US. There is sport and there is drama and there is art and hiking trips. The what is just a vehicle. I think what's really important is the how. And the first how part I wanted to talk about is communication. And by that, I mean speaking and listening and actually being heard. And I've found myself sitting around, even with my family, and realizing that 4 of us are all on our phones doing something. And I can hear them breathing, but I'm not communicating with them in any shape, sense, or form. And I think that's very common today. And when these young people arrive in Rising Sun, their mobile phones are popped in a filing cabinet and locked up, and they don't see them for 2 months. They have access to the internet sometimes. Often the computers don't work, which the staff love. And they're forced to focus inwards. And one of the activities that happens is every week, the same small groups, so maybe 4 or 5 young people, get together in a program called Wisdom Circles. And a question is posed to that group, and they practice speaking from the heart, speaking about something deeper than just the superficial, listening, challenging each other's ideas. So these are not complicated questions. It could be, what are your hopes and what are your fears? How have you experienced culture shock since you've been here this summer? Things like that. And what always shocks me is that for some of these young people, that is actually the first time that they have talked with someone like that. So they have to learn those skills of communicating. They're more connected through Facebook and through the internet than any generation before, but they're not actually grounded in any of those connections. They never get below a certain level, and then they don't get the opportunity to share what they're really thinking about. And I think that communication makes the interaction and the bonds between the community much stronger, but it also gives them this structure to negotiate with each other when a compromise is needed, or to find a way to resolve a conflict, or to discuss about a theft in the community and what the community wants to do about it. So I think the communication is really important, very important. And leading on from that then is that I wanted to talk about something else that I still haven't quite worked out how exactly it happens. I think it's through communication and through living intensely, which is that you learn to value each member of the community as an individual. So you're thinking about them and their actions and their achievements against their own individual context and not some set standard for everybody. And I think that is an incredible place to reach. And it allows the young people in these communities to challenge what fair means. Because fair then doesn't become about taking a cake and dividing it by 12 and giving everybody one equal slice. When you have a community of mixed needs, mixed abilities, you realize that fair might actually mean a different contribution from different people, or that people need different sized pieces of that cake. And it becomes not only acceptable to do that, but expected. And I think for a group of young people who are already on a scholarship program in New York, which already therefore puts them probably at the top end on the planet in terms of life opportunities, to learn that lesson that perhaps greater contributions are demanded from some than from others is very important, that to whom much is given, perhaps much is expected. So that's communication, talking about valuing the individual and this concept of fairness. So then perhaps more directly what this program is about leadership. Now you might think it's a very stupid idea to take 60 people, 60 precocious teenagers who all want to be leaders and put them in a contained space for 2 months. Because who would want to be a staff member on that program? But actually, the living intensely together and sharing and having to negotiate being in such close proximity for such a long period of time means that the idea of leadership that's promoted is servant leadership, from leading within the community, from meeting the community's needs before your own, from realizing that being a leader doesn't necessarily mean standing at the front or giving orders. And I think it's almost like the leadership is a byproduct of the whole program. Yes, it's very openly discussed, and there'll be discussions on concepts of leadership, on styles, iconic leaders, and each day a different member of the community takes charge for the day, if you like, with a staff member coaching them. And they really do take charge. So if the alarm clock doesn't go off in the morning and that person doesn't get up, then the whole community doesn't get breakfast. The staff member won't go and wake them up. They just leave them to get on with it. And so that happens, but I actually think it's the living experience that teaches the leadership that they can then take home. And what is the context of this leadership? Well, when you bring a group of people from all over the world together, and lots of them have personal experience of conflict and of big global issues, then discussing how to tackle global issues can be very high up the agenda. And when you're 15, that can be incredibly overwhelming. When I was 15, if you asked me, would I like to solve child poverty, I would have said yes. Would I know how to do it? Absolutely not. Was it scary? Yes. Was it disempowering? Absolutely. But when you surround yourself with an inspiring group of people with their hopes, their dreams, ambitions, and you work together in the summer, sometimes even preparing things before you've left, then you're ready to go home and step more powerfully into your world, into your community, and ready to engage and affect change. And that stepping out into your community, the great thing is that you're not doing it by yourself. There's another whole group of people who've been with you that summer who are also doing it too, and can be there to back you up as someone to talk with, to inspire you, to come up with an idea. Maybe you work on a project together. And that long-lasted connection is really an incredible thing. And because each year they bring 4 or 5 students from the year before back into the next year's program, the ways in which people are interacting and talking and connected is perpetuated across time. So when you bump into another alumnus who perhaps you haven't directly shared an experience with before, you know you have a common understanding. And wouldn't it be incredible if in our world that was the same, that I could immediately get to a deeper level of discussion with you because I had a common understanding with you about the way in which we are communicating and interacting. Now, I think there are some limitations to the program. You just put a single gender group of people just for 7 weeks. Maybe they never really relax. Maybe you never really test it. Maybe it's not long-term sustainable. But it does give a taste of what a community could be. The other thing that I think is very interesting is that perhaps as a result of the way in which these young people are selected, so they're selected not only for their leadership potential, but for being receptive perhaps to the Rising Sun ideas, I think there is a risk that almost the norming part of the community works too well. outside observers often say, after 3 or 4 weeks, these kids, they're all behaving the same, they're all doing the same things. And that's okay. The norming part is a great part of community, but is there a risk perhaps that we move beyond all acting and interacting in a similar way to thinking all in the same way? And maybe that is a risk there. Rising Sun has had a massive impact on my life, and the lessons that I've been really fortunate to learn from it, I hope to continue on for a long time. And when this talk is very similar in many ways to an evening program that we have every Saturday night called Council, where everybody gets together, the whole community gets together. They sit around in a circle, actually, so everybody can see each other. And in general, mainly it's the staff get up, and they're meant to impart some kind of wisdom. And I would always end every time I talked with setting a challenge. So I think that the Rising Sun ideas could improve, could better our shared coexistence, which was one of the questions that was posed today. So I would like to challenge you to think a little bit about some of the things I've talked about. Do you communicate with your community? Do you listen to them? Do you know if you've heard all of the voices in your immediate community? Do you value them? Is there anything where you're thinking perhaps this idea of valuing every individual in the community could be explored further? And are you surrounding yourself with people who inspire you and who together perhaps you can take on your local community or your global community and be the change that you want to see? Thank you.